Welcome, everyone, to the September 18th meeting of Economic Matters. Here in the chamber today is myself and Alderman Savage. We are going to make a couple adjustments to the agenda before we begin. First, we are going to remove AP 4024. And then we are going to move 0624 to the bottom of the agenda. Do I have a motion for those changes?
So moved.
I shall second. All in favor?
Aye.
The agenda, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
So I shall second. All in favor?
Aye.
Do I have a motion to approve the amendments, the minutes from our, April 17th meeting?
So moved.
I will second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Our economic situation has been fine for 3 months. Okay, folks. So up first, we have a wonderful amount of appointments. I see many of you folks are here. Some of you I recognize. Some of you I'll be meeting for the first time tonight. So I will call your name if you come forward. AP 3524, Ms. Frida Wildy, reappointment to the Maritime Advisory Board. Do you wish to come forward or and say a few things, or are you all set?
All set, thank you.
All right, so Ms. Wildy, thank you again for willing to serve on this board. I've known you very well over the years, and I'm very excited you wish to continue in this position. Do I have a motion for a favorable recommendation for AP 3524?
So moved.
I shall second. All in favor? Aye. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Up next, AP 3624, Mr. Michael Thomasimi to the Maritime Advisory Board. Mr. Thomasimi, do you wish to come forward?
No, that's okay. Thank you.
All righty. Well, thank you for your continuing willingness to serve. Do I have a favorable recommendation for AP 3624?
So moved.
I will second. All those in favor?
Aye.
AP 3724, the reappointment of Mr. Scott Allen to the Maritime Advisory Board. Mr. Allen is not here, but it's a reappointment, so that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Allen. Do I have a favorable recommendation for Mr. Allen?
So moved.
I shall second. All in favor? Aye. AP 3824, reappointment of Mr. Terrence Lomax to the Maritime Advisory Board. Mr. Lomax.
Nothing to say.
Well, I think we need to invite him up, though.
You got to come up here. You're under extra scrutiny.
So I drew the unlucky card.
Mr. Lomax, you've not only been service on this position, you're also our chair of the Maritime Advisory Board, correct?
I am. Sometimes much to my chagrin, but, but it has been a pleasure. It's been a long service, but it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure working with this council and a number of other councils along the way. So
I want to say thank you for your dedicated service to this board. Thank you for your service as chair. I'm looking forward to continuing to work with you as our economic situations continue to adjust, grow, develop on the maritime areas in Annapolis, and you've always been a flexible, wise voice in that board, so thank you.
thank you.
Mr. Savage, Alderman Savage, do you have any commentary yourself?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I just want to ask, since we have you before us, that doesn't happen too often. So do you have anything you'd like to relay from the board's perspective to bring to our attention, or anything moving forward?
It's going to be a challenging next few months between house barges and the Maritime Welcome Center, and I think the council and the board are both going to have a lot of things to deal with and talk about over the next few months.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Maybe not. But thank you.
Yeah, I'd encourage you, even if we neglect to refer something to the board, I would encourage you to still get us comments if you have any.
I try to remind you or Ross or the new alderman from the alderperson from the Ward 1 to remember to refer things.
Yeah.
Well, if you do have anything that's relevant to economic matters, please do not hesitate to reach out. We have, as you're probably aware, a very successful economic development program through the Economic Gardening, which started focusing on maritime properties. It's been very successful, and continuing to work through that.
And Stephen comes to our meeting every month and gives a great report and keeps us updated.
Awesome.
Good.
Well,
Okay.
need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. And with that, barring any further comments, do I have a favorable recommendation?
So moved.
I shall second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Up next, AP 3924, reappointment of Mr. Wilfred Scott to the Historic Preservation Commission. Will, would you like to come up and join us for anything, or?
Just to demonstrate to my future fellow commissioners that if you give me an opportunity to speak, I will.
There.
I'd just like to, even though he's absent, thank the mayor for renominating me and for you to consider.
Make sure you're on the mic.
my nomination.
Make sure the mic light is on, green mic.
There's the light's on. The green
Excellent.
light?
Yep, if it's green, it's good.
Okay. My Alderman, Alderman Schallmeyer, I appreciate the service you've done for our community, and Alderman Savage for the whole city, not being my alderman, but you're doing a lot of things that affect everyone, so I appreciate that. And I've considered it an honor and a privilege to serve for 30 years on the Planning Commission, retired, and then the mayor fulfilled, actually, I'm very serious, a longtime desire of mine, dream of mine, if you will. I was first appointed by Mayor Hillman to the Planning Commission, but I had requested appointment to the HPC. And he said, oh, we have plenty of good members there, but we need some new members on the Planning Commission. And I said yes and stayed there for 30 years, much to the chagrin of my wife. But after retirement, Mayor Buckley asked me to serve on the HPC, which is what I had wanted to do 30-some years earlier. I said, well, yeah, I would love to, much to the chagrin of my life. But anyway, so I hope this will be my last commission of service to the city. But if I live long enough, who knows? Thank you.
No.
Looking forward to continuing to keep you there for a lot longer. Thank you for your service. Alderman Savage, do you have any questions for Mr. Scott?
No, sir.
Do I have a favorable recommendation?
So moved.
I shall second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, sir. Up next, AP 4124, the reappointment of Mr. Robert Warden to the Heritage Commission. Mr. Warden here? He is not, but it's a reappointment, so it's fine. Do I have any commentary? No. Do I have a favorable recommendation?
So moved.
I will second. All in favor of AP 4124?
Aye.
AP 4224, the reappointment of Miss Alma Cropper to the Heritage Commission.
She's not here.
All right, well, it's a reappointment, so that's fine. Do I have any commentary? No. Do I have a favorable recommendation?
So moved.
I will second. AP 4224, reappointment of Alma Cropper. So, all in favor? Aye. Jiminy crickets. AP 4324, the reappointment of Mr. Todd Powell to the Heritage Commission.
He is not here.
All right. Do I have any, do I have a favorable recommendation for a motion
Oh,
for a
so moved,
favorable?
sorry.
I will second. All in favor?
Aye.
AP 4424, reappointment of Mr. Robert Hruby to the Building Board of Appeals. AP 4424. Mr. Hruby, would you like to join us up on the desk, sir? Or?
I don't have anything to add.
All right. Well, I will just say thank you for your continued service to our city. Alderman Savage, do you have any? Excellent. Do I have a favorable recommendation?
So moved.
I will second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
AP 4524, reappointment of Mr. John J. Schwartz to the Building Board of Appeals.
He's not here.
All right. All in favor? Or do I have a favorable recommendation?
So moved.
I will second. All in favor?
Aye.
AP 4624, the reappointment of Mr. Dick Peterson to the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board. Assuming he is not here, so do I have a favorable recommendation?
So moved.
I will second. All in favor? Aye. All righty, now we get to the fun stuff. AP 4824, appointment of Mr. Cecil Cummings to the Historic Preservation Commission. Mr. Cummings, welcome, sir. Please join us.
Thank you for having me. Is this on? Yep.
Yes, sir. Mr. Cummings, if you wouldn't mind reading your name, address into the record, and just introduce yourself and tell us why you want to be part of this board.
Sure. Cecil Cummins, 1046 Hyde Park Drive, Annapolis, Maryland. 21403. I am first and foremost excited to be a part of anything with the city. I've lived here my whole life, and love to be involved in any way that I can. And saw an opportunity to fill an opening here with the Historic Preservation Commission, and thought it was a great chance to start getting more involved.
Excellent. Now, Mr. Cummings, your resume, you work in your day job with commercial real estate, so I'm sure you're familiar with the delicate balance of historic preservation and the needs of our business community here in downtown. Do you have a particular story you'd like to share with us about how you were balancing that? Or?
Sure. So in my role, we have an opportunity to represent owners of real estate in Annapolis, tenants of real estate, and help facilitate and broker the, transaction between the two. So it may be. And I think that gives me an opportunity to be attuned to what's happening with the economic landscape here in the city. And, a couple of fun projects. Anytime I have an opportunity to work on a historic property, I really enjoy that process, and really focus on emphasizing the historic component and do everything in my power to make sure that the parties involved also respect that history. A fun project recently that was successfully completed was the disposition of Reynolds Tavern. I think when I applied, we were still under contract, so my application might say that's still in process, but we were able to successfully represent the seller in their disposition, and in this circumstance, we are very proud to say that the new owners are some people who are very involved in historic Annapolis, specifically as it relates to the tours, the walking tours and whatnot, and they have an incredible dedication to the preservation of that history. So that's just one example of something where when we were working on that transaction, we were very focused on a new owner respecting the history of Reynolds Tavern, and kind of controlling that in any way that we could, given the role that we had.
Excellent. Alderman Savage, do you have any questions for Mr. Cummings?
No, sir.
All right, Mr. Cummings, I appreciate your willingness to serve on this board. I don't think it's lost on anybody. You're a young person. This is normally dominated by folks who are not as energetic as us. And I appreciate that, and I'm excited to actually personally make the motion for a favorable recommendation for you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, sir. Your name will go in front of the council at our Monday meeting, and will probably be approved.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Up next, AP 4924, Mr. Eric Groft, appointment to the Historic Preservation Commission. Mr. Groft, welcome, sir.
Good evening.
If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, your name and address to the record, and share why you're excited to be part of this board.
Eric Groft, 1229 Boucher Avenue in Annapolis. I've lived in and around Annapolis my whole adult life. Started coming here in the 70s. I've witnessed a lot of the changes that have occurred in our fair city over the many decades. And I think why Gavin had invited me to do this is I've had a 40-year career in landscape architecture, where I've worked on historic properties up and down the East Coast, and I feel like it's my turn to give back to the city that I've lived in during my adult life.
Now, I wouldn't say you have a background on this. You're still actively working on historic preservation. You're a member of the board of the Cultural Landscape Foundation. That's correct?
That's correct. I'm just stepped down as co-chair.
Well, that's a wonderful background in this. Alderman Savage, do you have any
I don't.
questions for Mr. Groft? No. All right. Do I have a favorable recommendation?
So moved.
I will second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Sir, thank you so much for your willingness to serve.
Thank you.
Up next, AP 5124, the appointment of Miss Mary Bannon to the Historic Preservation Commission. Ms. Bannon, welcome.
Hello.
If you wouldn't mind reading your name, an address in for the record, and tell us why you would like to serve on the board.
Sure. My name is Mary Bannon, 182 Prince George Street, Annapolis 21401. And I am currently working as an interior designer in Annapolis and have had several careers, but this latest career has really piqued my interest in historic renovation, and I've been taking the architect and interior design courses through Anne Arundel Community College and have learned really a lot about code and space planning and historical renovations. And I've been coming to Annapolis. I got married here at St. Mary's, and I've been coming to Annapolis since my mother moved here in the late 80s. So I also have seen huge change in Annapolis, and I live downtown. I've lived there for almost 10 years, and I'm just very interested in sort of being a liaison to the residents downtown and the city as we move forward on this historic city dock renovation and some pretty huge changes. I'm excited to be involved and hopefully contribute.
Excellent. I also got married here, so.
You what?
I also got married in Annapolis.
Oh, you did? All right.
Now, as an interior designer, renovator, have you done any properties and work in downtown Annapolis, like the historic district?
I have, in Murray Hill and in, my area, Prince George and King George Street. I have some clients.
Now, how were you able to balance that work with like your clients' visions with our historic rules and regulations?
Well, at this point, it has been interior, so the work has not required, interaction with getting permits and those kinds of things. But I've been fortunate to have clients that, this is probably fairly typical, moved into a historic home because they love the historic home. So have been willing to, maintain it and do what it takes to keep it a historic home. And, I know Kevin and Laura and have, seen them renovate the Sands home. And, it's just wonderful to find people like that care so much about a place.
Excellent. Alderman Savage, do you have any questions?
Oh, no, sir.
Alderman Gay, do you have any questions? Excellent. Can I get a favorable recommendation for Miss Mary Bannon to the Historic Preservation Commission?
So moved.
Can I get a second, please?
I'm sorry, I didn't realize this is historic preservation.
Yes, sir. Do you?
I do have a question.
Okay.
Curious on your vision for the future of the city, understanding that the city of Annapolis is a historic city, but also understanding that we are a city. People have to live. We have to create opportunities for revenue, and particularly around zoning changes. Obviously, the Historic Preservation Commission plays a pivotal role in that. I want to know your thoughts on that. I also want to know your thoughts on supporting the City Dock project and Welcome Center.
Well, I'm not sure you were here when I said I've been coming to Annapolis now since like the late 80s, and I've seen some development that has certainly improved Annapolis. And I, as a homeowner and a resident in the historic district, have, a lot of things at stake, obviously, in continuing to see Annapolis improve. So I am positive on the city dock renovation. I mean, as I was with the garage, I know how long it's taken for any of these things to happen. So I'm not sure what your question was about the Welcome Center.
Or do you support the Welcome Center at the historic? I'm sorry. Do you support the Welcome Center? Historic Preservation and Historic Annapolis have openly campaigned against the Welcome Center, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. Because my opinion is, I would not want to appoint someone to a commission that is opposed to a project that the city has spent the last 2 years planning and investing in, with not only money, but also, volunteer hours, et cetera.
Right.
And so I'm just curious,
Right.
Do you support it? Maybe not in its existing format, but do you support some sort of Welcome Center in the city of Annapolis?
Definitely.
Okay.
And I had an hour-and-a-half coffee with the mayor the other week, and we talked at pretty great length about it, and I've been pleased to see the latest iteration of the plans and the location, and I certainly am in favor of removing the current Welcome Center.
Yeah, that you just made me happy. So,
So, yeah.
Any other questions?
no, sir.
Excellent. So the motion has been put forward. Can I get a second, please, for a favorable recommendation?
Second.
All those in favor of a favorable recommendation for Ms. Marion Bannon? Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
All righty. So, Alderman, just as a heads up for the agenda, we have moved 0624 to the bottom of it. So up next will be 01124. Do you wish to bring it forward today or postpone action?
Still wish to postpone it as I need to get with Cynthia to one, and I need to get with finance to one, make sure that the funding that was appropriated in fiscal year 24 is still there. And I'd also just like to go over some of the amendments.
All right. So we will postpone action on 01124, the Tenant Displacement Fund.
I just wanted to say hello to the all.
Good seeing you.
Excellent.
It's been a while.
So up next then will be the general discussion portion, ID 13124, flooding and... Oh, I didn't, I apologize, I goofed on procedure. I need to put forward a motion to delay action and then get it seconded. So Alderman Gay, I'm assuming you are,
I make a motion to postpone 01124.
do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Excellent. So ID 13124, flooding and business briefing. Mr. Rice, thank you so much for joining us today. So for the public's background on this update and briefing, as everyone is aware, we had some significant flooding in August to our downtown businesses. Mr. Rice has been working hand in hand with them to ensure a quick, full, and speedy recovery.
Thank you so much.
And we appreciate him coming here to give us updates on how the recovery is going. So, Mr. Rice, take it away, sir.
Thank you for having me. What you have before you is just my regular monthly report, but I will speak to the flooding unless there are any questions.
On the general report, I guess,
What is, oh, sorry.
well, since we're on the general report, how about you get to that first, then we'll get to the flooding portion.
Sure.
So for folks, if you are following along at home, we will now do ID 2024 and then go back to ID 13124.
So the the citywide commercial vacancy rate for August was 6%. We had 5 new businesses that opened in the city during the month, and there were 4 businesses that expanded or relocated. Our Economic Development Office provided support to 27 businesses during the month, and there was 1 ribbon cutting for Pearl Oyster Gallery on August 10th. Also, just highlights, and obviously we'll get to the Tropical Storm Debbie, but our office worked with the Baltimore City Small Business Administration Office, the Maryland SBDC Small Business Development Center, and Anne Arundel Economic Development Corporation to put together a small business resource fair at Pitt Moyer on August 20th. And primarily the focus was to provide access to financial opportunities and lending information. So there were various lending institutions that were there. There was also minority business certification from the state. And Mr. Garcia also provides some information on how to take advantage of procurements here in the city. So.
When did the flood happen again? I'm sorry.
It was not just August 8th, but it was, probably 8, 9. Okay. Yeah, it bled into, I want to say 2 days. Yeah. So I guess I'll shift gears to the flooding update.
Yes, please.
Okay. So I'll start off by saying all the businesses that were impacted are currently online. So we don't have any businesses that are not in operation following the flooding event at this juncture. Prior to the Tropical Storm Debbie hitting the city, we sent out a lot of information to the downtown businesses, letting them know what was happening, the best estimates as far as flood levels, all the information that was pushed out by emergency management, we made sure that they had. After the flooding hit, and as soon as we had information on kind of the scheduling, we pushed out information on the timing of damage assessments. And this is when the damage assessment teams from the city went around to look and survey damage to see if there was something really significant from a structural standpoint or anything like that. If there was any fear of sewage or some sort of contamination. So we made sure that the businesses knew what was happening on that front. Also, after the flood, I'll say after Tropical Storm Debbie hit, we also asked for preliminary damage, economic damage from the businesses. So we did a survey to try to find out, based upon preliminary early estimates, what's essentially the economic loss for your business. There are 4 types of economic loss or economic impact. The first is property damage. The second is equipment loss. The third is inventory loss. And the fourth is revenue loss. So our initial survey of the businesses yielded $181,350.
Are they using, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Are they using data from last year, the same days, and how much revenue they brought in to, like how are they saying we're out on $180,000?
So that $181,350 was a combination of the property, equipment, inventory, and revenue loss.
Okay.
But we didn't ask them about their methodology with regard to revenue loss, but presumably that's what they were doing. Most of the businesses know on a normal day, I typically take in X amount. My expenses are Y amount. So
okay, thank you.
Yeah. And just some totals, the property damage was 11,000, equipment was 20,250, inventory loss was 2,100, and most of it was revenue loss, 148,000. Many of the businesses were closed for 3 days, probably 2 days of flooding and the impact of the weather event, and then 1 day of cleanup and that sort of thing. Some businesses were closed longer, but anyway, we got updated numbers. So that was the preliminary. The updated numbers are as follows. The total number is $159,702.20. So the delta is about 20,000, and most of that is due to a reduction in the perceived amount of equipment loss. Some equipment that was thought to be lost was able to be salvaged. And so that's why there's a difference in that number. I can go through the separate categories, but that's essentially where things are now. We as a city have been in constant communication with the state, looking for grant funding to support these businesses and so forth. Just as an FYI, the program that was used previously to support businesses that were negatively impacted with weather events was a program that unfortunately sunsetted on June 30. And because it sunsetted, we weren't able to go back. And this is the VOLT program, or VLT, video lottery terminal. So money from the Volt program was able to be used as grants for businesses that were negatively impacted in emergencies. And so the city and the state have been in constant conversation with regard to what other funds might be available and what that would look like. So that's essentially where things stand.
Alderman Gay?
Thank you. So the Vault Fund, which I believe it provides up to $250,000, right, for individuals that apply, and it is for retrofitting the building, et cetera, all of those things?
I don't remember exactly how much it provides to businesses, but as far as the grants were concerned, businesses could receive up to $50,000 in grant funding.
Okay.
Under the legislation that previously or just recently sunsetted.
And was that carried out by the state or county? I know we didn't personally manage it. I'm just curious if there was a plan to, replenish the fund.
Yeah, so the administration of the grants was handled by the county and specifically Anne Arundel Economic Development, but it was state legislation that authorized the use of the funds for emergencies, and not just Annapolis and Anne Arundel County as well. I'm sure there will be an effort afoot in the next legislative session with the General Assembly to make sure that this is reauthorized.
Does the Small Business Association or Administration, or what is it, SBA? Yeah. Oh, you can't hear me. I'm sorry. Do they provide short-term loans or grants?
The short answer is yes. And, they have thresholds and so forth, but yes, they do in major incidents. And I want to say it was a few years ago when we had the tornado, when they actually set up a location here in the city and were available to process disaster loans.
I remember that vividly, yeah. And so when that happens, do you have are you able to work with the organization to expedite, application requests? Are you able to expedite application requests, through a partnership with the SBA, or really do we have any, in particular for the businesses downtown, they've, repetitively have to go through this with the flooding. I'm wondering how that works and how quickly does it take to get funding to them?
I can't speak to the timetable with regard to receiving funds once an application has been submitted and approved. I wouldn't think that it would take that long, but essentially our role is more so being a conduit, and not a conduit in the application pipeline, but more so making sure the businesses know that there's a resource there, making sure that we get the information out, press releases, all the relevant information to the businesses, and then also on the other side, making sure that the SBA or the state, or whomever knows these are businesses that we have in our system that have been impacted. These are the kinds of impacts that they've had. This is the result of the survey that we did.
Alderman Savage, do you have any questions?
No.
So, Mr. Rice, it is good to know that a lot of our businesses were able to get back up on their feet within about 3 days on average. How does that compare to the last round of flooding from back in January? Was that faster or?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the average was to get businesses up and running, but the last one was definitely worse.
Yeah.
I mean, this one was bad. That one was really bad.
Historic.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to getting repairs, getting back on their feet, is there any recurring problem that comes up as far as city bureaucracy, regulations, or things that the businesses think needs to be addressed on our side? Or is it all a very streamlined process at this point since it's just internal renovations?
Well, I think that I haven't heard any complaints from businesses, so I'll start there. I do think that there were some lessons learned from January that, you know, informed the way the city kind of went about the handling and the management of this situation. And one of those lessons learned, i.e., was letting the businesses know when the damage assessment teams would be coming by so that they could be open and have their establishments open. So if there was a need to go in and see what was going on internally, that, you know, that could be done, things like that. But I haven't heard any issues from the businesses.
All right. Do I have any other questions from the body for Mr. Rice? No. Mr. Rice, thank you so much for your presentation to us. We appreciate it. This had the ability to be catastrophic, but our team got everybody back on their feet within 3 days. That's really good to know. We have this done efficiently, and hopefully after our City Dock project is done, you won't have to give this presentation anymore.
Hopefully.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us tonight, sir. All righty. Up next, we have... what happened to my agenda? There it is.
I owe you a call back too, Stephen. I know we were playing phone tag. I'm sorry.
All right. Up next, we have 0624, citywide prohibition on new drive-through windows. Mr. Lushinsky is on his way and should be here shortly from Planning and Zoning. But Alderman Savage, as the primary sponsor, do you just want to say a few words for the committee before we get into general discussion? Mostly as we kill time before Mr. Lushinsky shows up.
Yeah, sure. So I did post a sponsor's brief on this, along with your help as co-sponsor, just to point out for the public. But for me, it really comes down to helping, through the course of us reviewing the comp plan, I think that really presents a very inspirational vision for how we want the city to look in the future. And a lot of it is moving away from auto-centric development. And I think we have quite a number of drive-throughs. I was counting in my ward, well, at least right outside my neighborhood alone, we have, what do we have, about 5 of them. We have 2 banks, Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks, and CVS. And some of them we have gotten 2 of them in the past, I think, 10 years. So they are still getting built. And I just remember something that I think Mr. Lushinsky made clear in the comp plan. I think he stated somewhere in there where in order to have mixed use, which I think many of us agree on wanting mixed use, you have to have a pedestrian-friendly environment. And I think using our space for parking, for drive-throughs just doesn't really seem like the most efficient thing to do. And the other thing, which I don't think I added to the sponsor report, was looking at another parking lot in my ward that has drive-throughs, which is the Giant parking lot. It doesn't cause the drive-throughs there don't cause too much issue externally because they're surrounded by a curb and they're containment in the parking lot. But the issue is that we want to do many different things with our parking lots. I know there's been talk of adding housing on some of them. There's been talk of taking out some spots and putting up trees. There's been talk of, especially for that shopping center, I want to get stormwater management. There's 0 stormwater management on that property. And so if we say to somebody that if we allow for more people to build, and there was a proposal there to put another development with the drive-through, that has a large footprint, and they have to have a queue for those cars backing up through the parking lot. And so I think that really hamstrings us from being able to repurpose the parking. And so, contrary to what I've heard, some people say this does not get rid of drive-throughs. It's not even, it's not really a ban on drive-throughs. It's just a prohibition on new ones. We're not trying to get rid of all of them. So I think that's I know I have, anyway, I guess I'll just end it there because I know we've received quite a bit of public feedback, mixed, some good, some critical. I think there is a fear out there that we're looking to get rid of all drive-throughs again, and we're not. But I think they do end up conflicting with the direction we're trying to go. And I also know, I have a number of seniors in my ward. I've heard some concern from them, but not too much. But when I explain to them, I'm like, well, look, at some point you're not going to be able to drive, and it'll be better for you to have development when you reach that point that is more safe for pedestrian traffic and not so dependent on automobile. But we have received a couple of requests to review for amendments from, I believe, a Retailers Association, Bank Association.
Yes.
And I think maybe restaurant. I'm sure they all want kind of their own carve-outs, which if we do carve-outs for all of them, the whole thing would be a moot point. So I think that's one point. I know we may need to discuss that. I know the chair and I have wanted to get your feedback on some amendments that we are thinking as sponsors, but I guess, I don't know, Chair, if you had any other.
I have two commentary. As someone whose day job is with a trade association, the belief of trade associations is regulations are great, just please exempt our industry from them, which I understand. Trade association has to do what they have to do, but I respectfully disagree on this case. For me, the major case on this one is also the overall economics of this land use pattern. The recent Urban 3 land value study has shown that drive-throughs are a revenue negative for the city. The tax revenue that we get in from property tax compared to the expenditures that the city puts in servicing the infrastructure, water, sewer, roadways, sidewalks, does not break positively for us. And that means we are subsidizing these businesses. And when we are subsidizing these businesses, what we have to do in order to balance out our budget sheets is either cut services, which in a way we are doing. We are not maintaining our infrastructure in a way that I personally believe is adequate, in large part because of bad land use patterns prevents us from getting the revenue to do it. And eventually it causes us to start doing real service cuts that residents actually significantly start seeing, or raise taxes. Neither of these things are what I would like to do. So this bill, in my mind, merely stops the bleeding. It goes, we are not going to take another step down this development path that causes us revenue negative outcomes. So on top of the issues of blowing up walkability, increasing overall danger for pedestrians due to the curb cuts and people going in and out, and just general inefficiency in land use. So I will also comment that this passed out of our planning commission with a favorable recommendation, with a very overwhelming majority. And I understand the worry of change, but change is the only constant. Now, Mr. Lashinsky, I would like to bring it over to you. I understand planning and zoning and the sponsors of this have some differences on opinions on staff reports, but we're here to talk about what are some things we can agree on and put forward the best piece of legislation. So, sir, unless, I don't know if you have any words you'd like to say on the legislation itself, or if we want to get into questions from the committee, or start off with you and then we'll get into questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eric Lashinsky, Chief of Comprehensive Planning. Our Director of Planning and Zoning is away, so I'm filling in, but very much familiar with the legislation. I did write the staff report after consulting with other staff in the office, in our department. I guess I'll start by saying, we fundamentally agree with the sentiment behind this legislation. I mean, the pattern of development that is perpetuated by drive-through businesses is a pattern of development that we are trying to move away from. It is not a value proposition for the city. It's as you referenced from the economic study that our office conducted. These types of businesses are not a net gain for the city, and from an economic perspective, from a health and quality of life perspective. I mean, their value is limited to, I would say, circumstances where people may feel like they have no other option. I think from a planning perspective, we're often reluctant to eliminate options or tools wholesale. I think it's something we rarely do. We try to leave open the potential for options that we might need in some circumstance. In this case, I mean, what we tried to do was focus. The way we see change happening is more through standards that will create the kind of urban environment where a drive-through business makes no practical sense. If you think about where drive-through businesses thrive in Annapolis today, and they do thrive, and they are profitable businesses in the city today, or they wouldn't be here. They thrive on corridors that have no real viable infrastructure for pedestrians, transit users, cyclists, are really just oriented to the automobile. And that's really the fundamental problem, that over time, we have not, as a city, we have not created an urban environment that discourages drive-through businesses. They cluster in locations where they're going to find customers arriving by vehicle, and it's just as simple as that. And so, as a department, we really want to create the conditions that will make these businesses less viable, frankly. I mean, that's as simple as that. I mean, we want to create a more walkable urban environment. That's what we heard during the comprehensive planning process. It's probably the one thing that people seem to agree on, is creating a more walkable urban environment, more neighborhoods where people could get to places without a car, for all the reasons that matters. It ultimately has great kind of macro positive effects on the city, from reducing traffic congestion to air pollution and stormwater pollution. And so, that's kind of where we stand. I think we made the recommendation that if you're going to, actually reduce drive-through businesses in the future, this is one way of doing it, but our preference would have been to simply exclude them from planned developments, which is where we see most of these happening in the future, as part of larger developments, whether they're shopping center redevelopments or some other large real estate development. We thought that would be kind of a more nuanced approach to move in the direction of creating an urban environment that is truly more walkable. But we certainly respect the opinion of this committee and the council, and that's really what matters at the end of the day. So, I mean, we're trying to provide a recommendation, but I think, as Alderman Savage mentioned, I mean, at the end of the day, I think there will still be drive-through businesses in the city after this if this legislation is adopted. these are kind of legacy businesses in many cases, and they're gonna be around until we change the way we live in the city. So it's that's I feel like the reality. But so we really want to get to a place where we're creating an urban environment where it kind of walkable retail is the most practical economic investment in a particular commercial area.
All right, so Alderman Gay had requested a question. Alderman Gay?
Thank you so much. I need clarity on just two things, because as it currently stands, I don't support the legislation. And I fully understand the sponsor's intent, and I want to be an advocate and a friend to environmental concerns, and particularly environmental justice as it relates to air pollution, et cetera. Are banks and pharmaceutical companies grandfathered in as the legislation currently stands, or would that require an amendment?
Alderman Savage?
So it depends on what you mean by grandfathering. Existing businesses with drive-throughs would be grandfathered. That's one thing we need to talk about more, but currently they would be completely grandfathered. Now but any new, even if it's a new pharmacy or bank as written, would not be allowed to have a drive-through.
I'm just curious. I mean, in particularly as we talk about, development, et cetera, why not integrate drive-throughs into existing plans that we have? I obviously understand the need to, get away from the automobile, but I could also see integration of drive-through, whether it be in particularly banks and pharmaceutical industries. I could care less about the McDonald's and all that stuff. Billion-dollar companies, they'll live. But I am concerned about just access to what are deemed as like quality of life resources, and how that could be integrated into our plans. For example, when we were in the Netherlands, there were not a lot of obviously automobile drive-throughs, but there were a lot of like windows where you could purchase, items, etc. And so how do you make a balance? Like, that's my first question. How do you not destroy a business model, protect the residents, and maybe integrate, drive-throughs into, future planning? Last point, I'm also seeing now, even in some of these places, they're making the 2-story drive-throughs to actually condense down on space, and also offer, that's the purpose of it, because they say it helps, you're not so stretched out the building. You haven't seen a 2-story Taco Bell?
No.
Yes, they have 2-story drive-throughs, and so I'm wondering about that, because in my mind, I'm thinking like, oh, well, why can't you put houses on top of the McDonald's? It can be done. It's like kind of like living in the city, where they have the stores down bottom and there's constantly cars around. Just curious about that.
Okay, so I'm looking at the 2-story drive-through. I was thinking like it had ramps going up.
Oh, no.
It puts restaurant on top of drive-through lanes.
There are already standards in our development code for drive-through businesses. You certainly could augment the standards to create the kind of outcome that you're talking about. I think about the type of drive-throughs that are maybe less obtrusive or not discourage pedestrian activity. There's a few in the city. We included one with the staff report that's in Eastport, the former BB&T bank that is now a Nancy Hammond Gallery. I think about the Rutabaga juice shop in West Annapolis. I think about the Dunkin' Donuts drive-through at the Bay Forest Shopping Center, which again, it's part of a shopping center. It's very non-obtrusive as far as drive-throughs go. So, I mean, you could create standards that sort of limit the scope of the drive-through, so you don't end up with something maybe in like the Chick-fil-A in the Parole area, which is kind of a massive drive-through, probably the largest of the ones.
And I hate to cut you off, but that's every time I ride past that Chick-fil-A, by the way, I can count on, my two hands how many times I've purchased from Chick-fil-A in the last like 5 years. But every time I ride by there, I'm like, how could this drive-through get approved? I mean, it's a god-awful design. And if it's really booming, traffic is spewing out onto, I forget that side road by the Coles. I forget exactly what that is. And so is this legislation really necessary? Or could you use the Planning Commission and the Planning and Zoning Department to just kind of filter out those type of projects?
It's, a point we're trying to make in the staff report is that there are a fair number of checks and balances in our development review process. It's never assured. You can't really predict the outcome, I would say, because it goes through a number of different bodies and reviews. But it does seem that the Planning Commission today obviously provide a favorable recommendation for the legislation. Would a Planning Commission in future years do the same? It's hard to know. There's a culture in the city that changes, obviously, and but it is. I would not rest on the laurels of our development regulations because, as you say, a drive-through business like Chick-fil-A was approved. They met the standards that are in place. They did everything they were required to do, and that's what the outcome was. So, I think it's very site dependent. Also, I think in that location where the Chick-fil-A is located, it is a car-dominated environment. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's probably the most auto-centric part of the city. So it may have been hard to sort of push back on a proposal in that location, whereas in a different part of the city, it may have been less viable,
And that's technically city, correct?
That is the city, yeah. It's right on the boundary of the city.
And so I'm actually shocked that was approved by the City Planning Commission. Lastly, and this absolutely worries me, the equity report, the very first thing. Drive-through users in this study we looked at were disproportionately female, low-income, seniors, and African-American or Hispanic. Such ban may disproportionately affect these groups. Mm-hmm. How do I justify voting for this with, and this may be a question for my colleagues instead, with just this glaring.
What's the ethnic makeup of neighborhoods where we build these?
Well, I can't tell you that because I don't really, know the. When I think of drive-throughs, I primarily think of wards 3 and maybe 7 because they do have Forest Drive, and so those are predominantly minority communities, and so I get the environmental impacts obviously, but again, it's something I try to stress is that if you are in a race. If you are having quality of life issues or socioeconomic issues, your first thought is not air pollution or, hey, this bike path would be, a better, opportunity for me. Your thought is I need to be able to get to and from work. I need to feed my kids. I need to be able to pick up, medicines. I need to live without, any excessive burdens. And so how do we explain, in particular to these demographics, that this could potentially help them, and then also, I guess I feel a lot comfortable because the alderman has said that there could be some grandfathering in And so existing institutions would be in place. That means existing communities could still benefit from, the facilities. And so, but just how do you, what would the messaging be there?
Well, when it comes to the equity report, as far as minority, and I apologize, Alderman Savage, I know you had also wanted to address a couple issues and concerns and had questions. We've shoved these things in minority neighborhoods because when you try to put them in richer, whiter, more organized areas, they get fought off. There's an understanding that people don't like these types of businesses in their area. And so we've, in American urban planning, we've done what every American urban planning professional has done during the post-Robert Moses era, and that's shove them where the minorities are. And I think that's why you have a higher use of African Americans and Latinos, because that's where they're built. If we built more Wegmans in minority neighborhoods, they'd probably see a higher proportion of Wegmans. It's just literally what is in proximity to your area. In regards to the day-to-day concerns, like, look, I'm just trying to get by. Hey, man, I get it. I've come home from working late night in a restaurant at midnight and just needed something to eat. But the main thing for me on that front is you look at what we are having to do to subsidize these businesses that aren't local. They're a very extractionary model. It's a national headquartered chain, and yes, even if they franchise it, money is still going to that headquarters up in whatever the corporate office location is. It takes resources away from the community instead of going into more local restaurants, more local services. Mm-hmm. So if we were not subsidizing these businesses, we could spend that money better on better infrastructure, better sidewalks, maybe get to a tax cut, that sort of thing. Alderman Savage, I will yield to you for if you wish to answer any more on the Alderman's questions, or if you have any other questions and concerns you would like to address to Mr. Lasitsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, yes to both. But first of all, just responding to Alderman Gay, just to build off that point, what actually clicked with me when on our last council meeting, when we had folks come to talk about atonement, their community was destroyed by a parking garage. Mm-hmm. Drive-throughs do not build community, right? Why would we want to allow more space that could be used for community, more houses, to put in a drive-through? Because you also got to factor in, we're talking about possibly reducing or removing some of the parking requirements, mm-hmm. right? If we do that, these things work in tandem. If we do that, we will have more space, more ability to add these other amenities, be it housing or stormwater or whatever, right? Or just, again, build community where those parking lots used to be. But the problem with the businesses that want to come in with drive-throughs is they don't, that's their box, and they want to build their box with all the drive-through, everything else. They don't want to change. And so that's why I think a prohibition is useful in that regard, because for me, again, it goes back to the whole thing. We're trying to atone for destroying a community with a parking garage, and it's the same thing, like the Alderman Schnellmeyer was just saying. It's where they often go.
So why not, and I look at the garages, listen, there we 100% agree. I think the county should give us that garage, pay for the demolition fees, and we should be building community there. I think just in general with this, I would be a lot more comfortable if in word the pharmacies and banks were protected. And I'm just thinking just in, like I said, the fast food, Upper West Street, I completely agree with you. I think it's terrible for traffic. I think it just causes so many other issues. That land could be, better serviced. With the banks and pharmacies, though, I'm concerned because, one, we already don't have many banks in Annapolis. We've got the Truist off of Forest. I think the Bank of America is still here. Oh, no, they left on the corner. you know, we've got the SunTrust. Everything is pretty much out by parole. And so I would feel a lot better if we left room for, you know, for banks to grow, and pharmacies. And I look at them as something that can be fit into our Annapolis Ahead 2040 plan, because a bank and a pharmacy, unlike like a Burger King, it's much less much less customers. You don't really need all of the excess parking that you would need for like a fast food establishment. And I've seen banks incorporated into community. I mean, even look at the Annapolis Town Center. You got the CQ Bank there, and above it is obviously stores and the garages and stuff. And they have a drive-through, kind of, you can, walk up and park or whatever. But I don't know. I look at, in particularly micro units even, oh, wow, we got the CQ on West Street right here. That's got housing above it. No drive-through, but it does have, the back lots and all of that stuff. And so I think, those two things could be integrated into community and provide critical services. Health and finances are two things that we all need.
Yeah, for sure. But I think also related to the diversity question, though, is I understand they looked at the audience for who uses the drive-thrus, but there are a couple of responses to that. One is you got to look at who are the most people who walk and bike. Mm-hmm. That's going to be lower income and minorities, right? And those are the ones who are going to be impacted negatively by perpetuation of drive-thrus, mm-hmm. right? Because you're always going to be having cars coming in and out of egress, right? Because, then frankly, with the incident we just had happen, where a young kid was killed in a parking lot, mm-hmm. and I understand it's not directly because of drive-thru or anything like that, but it's the whole idea of like that happened in a land use for cars, mm-hmm. designed for cars, right? And that ultimately, I think, is one of the drivers behind that, right? So I think, but also look from the minority perspective as far as, and from the youth perspective, I think it's like 60% of the youth don't have cars. And then as you get older, obviously that goes down, but as you get older for seniors, that goes down as well. Like I think it's similar, I think it might be 30%, something like that. But anyway, it gets pretty high again. And so those are vulnerable populations, and I think not factored into this diversity analysis, right? So, because I also think we also have plenty of existing drive-thrus. It's not like we're going to have a dearth of them. But as far as the banks and pharmacies as well, I think we need those land uses for sure. And I think that's going to come down to, frankly, planning and zoning to make sure when we do the redevelopment towards mixed use, it'll, I think, give them an easier time to be able to say, look, it's just not a permitted use, but we need banks, we need pharmacies to come in. Just like they come in downtown. We don't have drive-thrus down there. I don't really know why. I mean, at least I know on the one hand I do, but on the other hand I don't, right? Why don't we have them downtown, but they're okay for elsewhere? It's because they don't make sense down there because it's very dense. Mm-hmm. And we do have a lot more people on foot.
So, gosh, you just made a good point, and I wanted to expand on that, and I just, it slipped my mind. I'm sorry. You were talking about the existing facilities that we do have. Mm-hmm. Okay, so, and I'll just say I'm the McDonald's owner, right? And, actually I can use the KFC, which was just across the street. I'm the KFC owner. I'm, closing shop or whatever. As a prospective buyer, I'm looking at the existing structure to put a drive-through there. Yeah. Would I be able to purchase the a structure and go through planning and zoning and bring in a business that with a drive-through? Because it's the same building, but a new company.
That's actually the question we need to get to
Okay.
next, but can we hold off on that just a minute?
Yeah,
Because
of
I wanted to respond to a couple other things that Mr. Lashinsky said, and thank you for coming in the evening. And I guess, you're talking about our existing standards, and I do get the point where we do have standards currently for drive-throughs and the Planning Commission, but even the Planning Commission said, don't leave it up to us. But my other response to that is, which I think I said to the Planning Commission, our standards haven't worked super well, right? And I think that's where we may be better served. Because I'm thinking because you're like, oh, you could exempt plan unit development. And again, I understand the wisdom behind that, but I'm also asking myself, is the juice worth the squeeze as far as trying to draft specific standards, specific exemptions for this type of land use when, again, we've got a lot of them and they're clearly not going in the direction we want to go. And as far as Forest Drive and West Street, those are the two most dangerous roads. I think Forest Drive is the most dangerous road in the county. And so that's where, and I think Alderman Schannemeyer said stop the bleeding. It's actually, there's a literal meaning to that. We do literally want to stop the bleeding and accidents that happen on those roadways, especially. And I understand that they currently are maybe not designed is the right word, but I forget how you put it, Mr. Lashinsky there. But those do have a lot of most of the drive-throughs because that's what those roads are like. But the fact is they're death traps. So I think just because they have a lot of those uses currently, in my mind, doesn't mean we should necessarily keep continuing it, right?
I think we're sort of stuck in this self-perpetuating cycle where, these types of businesses locate on corridors that are some of the lowest cost real estate in the city, where you have high concentrations of low-income residents, minority communities. And so these businesses perpetuate that situation. So, I guess the quote that Alderman Gay shared, where was that from? You were talking about the people who are impacted by the legislation?
The equity report.
Is that something that's put out by the city manager's office?
Yeah, it's very new. It's actually just was required, I think, starting in June.
Because I heard that, I was like, I understand where that's coming from, but I guess points that Alderman Savage and Schannemeyer shared, it's because these communities don't have other options, and that's, of course, they're going to be impacted by the loss of this, but there's a potential positive, which is that the kind of business that replace these could have a different type of service, a different type of food. They're not going to be as much, the vehicle emissions are going to be lowered. There is a potential net gain to not having the drive-through in that community that, would benefit these communities. So I think there's two sides to that perspective that it's important to acknowledge. But
all right. So I would like to get forward to potential amendments if the committee members are amendable. I do think we have had a very robust and productive discussion on goals and questions on the issue. So for Alderman Gay's example, with the current KFC, the business is no longer in operation. It has a drive-through. If someone wanted to reopen it with the drive-through. So this is where I'm glad you're here, because my actual understanding of the legislation was that qualified as would not trigger this because it's already in existence. You were shaking your head. The audience could not see that, but is that not your interpretation?
No, it's not. When the business changes hands and new ownership comes in, they have to apply for a new permit. And that's when if this use is not allowed, that use would not continue. So it's not, so these types of existing drive-through businesses in the city are not going to be grandfathered in for perpetuity. It's really just, if there's an existing business there today, that's allowed, it's deemed conforming, essentially. But if it changes hands, that use would go away, so.
Now, Alderman Savage, you are the primary sponsor of this legislation. What are your thoughts on that? Do you wish to put forward any potential amendment or discuss any amendment to allow that? I have mixed feelings on it myself, but as the primary sponsor, I'll allow you to go first.
Thank you. Well, I have mixed feelings on it too. I have received a specific request to consider, and as far as allowing some level of grandfathering, it sounds like, but so I can understand you, you're saying if the business were to change, like for example, whatever, if a McDonald's left and a Burger King wanted to come in.
If it's a new owner, they have to get a new permit.
Resubmit.
Yeah.
So under this scenario, if this passed, they would resubmit and they would not be allowed to, it'd be there,
Right.
but they wouldn't be allowed to use the drive-through.
Right. They could do just a standard restaurant there.
So I guess I'm more open to this as far as a compromise, to say that within constraints, to say that it's grandfathered unless two things happen. One, there's substantive renovation or rebuild, right? And then they'd lose it. Or two, and this is what I wanted to get your feedback on both these, or assuming the committee is interested. The second one would be, what's the second one I was going to bring up? So first one was substantial. Oh yeah. Second one would be that they would lose the grandfathering if there was some kind of rezoning of the property. And my intention with that is to think, well, look, I know the comp plan wants to see more mixed use and, again, more pedestrian-friendly development. So if we do move in that direction and rezone, and again, I'm thinking of even in my ward, the Giant, if we want to rezone that, then it seems like that would make sense. We would want to have uses that are compatible with mixed use, right? Which would mean they'd lose the grandfathering. I don't know if that's something the committee is interested in. We could talk about possible language, but
if I may, I agree with your assessment. There's what my heart wants to do, which is, yeah, we want to get rid of these things, like, let's go. And then there is the practical aspects. And ultimately, the government, we have to look at those. And I think you have come up with a very good way to adjust these things, where if there is substantial, I guess, external renovation, we should call it, and or a rezoning of the property, that this is a continued allowed use. Because that is something that came up in my conversation with the Bankers Association, mentioning the renovation of the new Bank of America into a Chase Bank over in your ward off of Forest Drive. And I think that is fair. So I agree with that idea. Alderman Gay, do you have any comments on that yourself, sir?
What was your point?
Essentially, and if I'm misinterpreting what you're saying, please correct me. Your KFC example, currently as written, so I was mistaken. I thought it would be allowed, but the bill as written would not. So the amendment would allow that property to open a drive-through back in. So current KFC, Bojangles wants to come in. Bojangles wants a drive-through. They keep the external of the building the same. They can use the drive-through.
Yeah, and I think that's a better example of grandfathering. It's like, it's an existing structure. You can, set it up. And then I think at some point down the line, that doesn't happen again. Somebody else buys and they're like, okay, we don't want the drive-through, you know?
And our down the line point that Alderman Savage came up with and that I agree with is significant external renovation and or rezoning.
Well, significant external renovation, to me, that won't happen. I'd probably, because I mean, really, what would you change? You know, in particular, if you already have the egress and,
Well, if we got rid of parking, they could want to add, I don't know, a wing to the business or something.
okay,
right?
okay.
Yeah. Or they want to tear it down, build an office. Or,
Yeah.
You may want to ask the law office to put in a a metric like what determines substantial. I think in our code, 20% of the square footage is deemed like a major modification, if I'm not mistaken. But that's something to check. I think some you should probably clarify like what that substantial renovation means, just so it's more clear. But
Let me ask a quick question. I'll get to you, Alderman Savage. Mr. Lashinsky, is substantial modification, was that the wording that you used?
yeah, I think it's actually major modification.
Major modification,
I think that's
thank you.
the term that's used in the code.
Is that our legal term for big external renovations that we are talking
I
about?
believe that would be the term. Yeah.
Alderman Savage?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I'm thinking of like the stormwater regs. I thought they used substantial, but maybe it was major. There might be some, surprise, might be inconsistency between our code. But so the other question I would have, because I'm thinking of scenarios where we would not want more drive-throughs or not want them grandfathered, would be, I'd say, proximity to schools, right? Because we do want kids to start walking to school more, and I think, so I don't know if you have suggestions what might make sense now or later, Mr. Lashinsky, but I don't know, 1,000 feet, 500, 2,000 feet, I don't know really where to start, but I feel like, because thinking it in my ward, we've got Georgetown East, which it's set off, but you have St. Anne's, and then it's in your ward, middle school.
Annapolis
Middle in particular is like right on the road. Then you have Hillsmere, and like my son walks down past Hillsmere, so I know there are kids walking. But the middle schools have really the glaring example of.
And there is that one shopping plaza where the Fresh and Healthy used to be. There's still a drive-through window there. It's no longer in effect because the business closed, but I do not want to see that back in operation. I like 1,000 feet myself. I think that is fair.
Yeah.
If I can puzzle out potential language here, I don't think we need a separate amendment for that. I think we can allow drive-throughs as a grandfathering for existing buildings unless they are within 1,000 feet of a school until there is a major modification or a rezoning of the property. Is that an amendment that you are comfortable with as the primary sponsor?
Yeah, I think Alderman Gay had.
I am also good with that. Alderman Gay, sir.
Yeah, I think it's a bridge too far. No surprise. All right. I'm just thinking of life in general. I'm like, not that Annapolis High School was even in the city, but there are drive-thrus all up and down there. And, the kids actually rely on that for work and, economic gain. There's the freaking Dunkin' Donuts that's wrapped out into Riva every single day. It's like,
I hate that. It's my bus.
I mean, yeah, people don't like it, but it serves a purpose for the community. And I think, yes, we want to be protective of our land use and our environmental protections, but I also don't want to take away from people's quality of life. And my second thing is with schools in the city, are there really any schools where, something like that, where a drive-through could, potentially be developed? I mean, we do have, as he mentioned, the BB&T that's across from Eastport Elementary School, which was a restaurant. Now it's an art gallery. I don't recall any drastic incidents taking place there. I think in my ward, Tyler Heights and Georgetown, that Georgetown East is in yours, but it butts into my ward. There's absolutely no way a drive-through would be able to be near those schools because it's a residential area. Same thing with West Annapolis Elementary School, same thing with Annapolis Elementary School. And Bates, really, if you look at any of our schools, I don't think that a drive-through would ever be eligible for construction there.
Annapolis Middle. Technically, it's part of the county. It's a giant hole in the middle of Ward 5 that the county owns for reasons that predate me and I've never really bothered to look at. But there are some old strip malls that, as of this moment, could be renovated and turned into a single Taco Bell or a single McDonald's or Burger King. There's not any plans of that I am aware of, but it could happen.
Also, a definition for drive-through needs to be, you have Brewster's. That's a drive-through.
That's a pull-up.
That's kind of like a drive-through.
It's a walk-up.
I think there is a definition in the city code. I'd have to look it up, but I'm fairly certain there is a definition. I mean,
to
drive-through window, I think is how it's.
Yeah, and that's my thing. It's like if you have a window and I have to drive there, is that too specific?
I don't consider Brewster's or El Cabrito or Little Italy or
Pit Boys. I think
Pit Boys does not have one.
Okay.
You have to be able to not get out of your car and be provided the service. So
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all those, it's just a strip mall with a walk-up window.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not that I'll bash those strip malls. I am at El Cabrito once a week.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I just on that just quick, because I think the value the businesses provide is the business model itself, not the drive-through. And particularly the Dunk. I'd pass the Dunkin' every day for work, and I've been starting to bike past it. And I got to tell you, that's one of, I submitted this whole list of complaints, Eric's probably not surprised, to the county as far as dangers to bikes. And that was on my list because when I'm biking past, there's no ped signal. And you're biking past these people trying to get out of that drive-through as fast as you can. Like, that is not, it's not safe for kids.
There definitely could be signage and improvements there. But my thing is this, and this is where I get mad with bikers, okay? And I like a bike, all right? I'm not opposed to anybody that wants to ride their bike. Even, in fact, I work in Baltimore City. They now are have a program where if you're an employee, they'll give you $750 towards an electric bike, to promote, the purchasing of bikes, etc. So I'm not opposed to that, but is the biker's quality of life more important than the automobile?
You're not talking about quality. You're talking about a danger.
But
you're not talking about a danger to automobiles.
Food is quality of life.
If you take away a car or a resident's ability to use a drive-through, that's not a danger to their life. What threatens people's lives are the pedestrians and cyclists having to deal with drive-throughs. That is a danger to their lives.
So me not being able to access food.
Now, Alderman Gay, with all due respect,
I might have been pushing.
If they took away as a New Englander, I have an appreciator of Dunkin', to talk the language of my people.
Which America runs on. So.
America runs on it, and I'm going to talk the language of my people now and start dropping my ass. But if the drive-through goes away, we have not taken Dunkin' from you. You can still access the Dunkin'. It's just you park your car. I'm having too much fun doing that. So we haven't taken that away from you. We've just changed behavior modification a little bit. Now, I do sense this conversation is going away from the amendment as a whole, though, which I would like for this to kind of keep going back towards. I don't plan on voting on this legislation tonight because I do want to try to get this amendment drafted. But on the commentary of the amendment for the amendment that we put forward for grandfathering drive-throughs as a use for existing structures, unless they're within 1,000 feet of a school, until there is a major modification or a rezoning of the property. Do you have commentary on that amendment as a whole, even if it's just no, or I don't like it, or anything else?
No, I mean, I think I want to support the grandfathering, and if you want to have a school, thing in there, that's fine.
Okay, so we're not going to vote on the potential amendment tonight. I'm going to send that into the law office to write on, and by our next Economic Matters meeting, we'll have that written down. We can discuss it. I'll send that out to the committee, and after we get it drafted, we can figure out if we just want that to be our individual amendment or...
And please add me as a co-sponsor.
Yes, Alderman Savage.
Thank you. And yeah, I would just say, if you have any thoughts on that, please let us know as far as further refinements or how to word that.
No, I don't have any
We
other
can
for it.
share the amendment with you when we get a draft.
Yeah. I will email the law office now. Mr. Lashinsky, I'll have you CC'd and my colleagues here as well. That way we're all sent the draft of it and we can discuss offline until it is ready for presentation at the next Economic Matters hearing. Do we have any other potential discussions on amendments or potential amendments for 06? Yes, sir.
Okay, never mind. I was going to say, you need to change the definition of drive-through, but because it is in this, any vehicular aisle or opening in the wall of a building or structure used for sales. So technically, something like then the last line, which I think this is an amendment, where you have to remain in the vehicle. And so that allows your drive-through to work.
Yeah, excellent. Any other discussion on potential amendments or overall discussion on 0624?
Nope.
Just two really last quick ones.
Yes, sir.
I'm at Giant. I'm staying in my vehicle. They're bringing out product to me. Is that considered a drive-through?
No.
But I'm purchasing an item and I'm providing, or they're providing me sale, and I'm in my vehicle.
My interpretation of that, and Mr. Lashinsky, as a representative of planning and zoning, can confirm if I am correct or not, is that since that is not a dedicated through lane,
Okay.
It being the through lane is the key.
Right.
It's you parking curbside and it coming out.
And lastly, I would like to see, if possible, and maybe, yes, it probably should come from this committee because we are economic. Maybe we get with Uber or Lyft or something, and there has to be some promo codes. Maybe we offer, higher incentive for the bus, free bus stuff. I mean, because again, if you want to change people's patterns and behavior, I think they should have assistance in that, whether it be financial or hell, even if we just put up a bunch of signs that say, hey, drive-throughs are, bad for the environment. We are taking steps to mitigate those harms. I think that's just important so people don't just think like, oh, they're going off the rails banning drive-throughs,
For me, I see this as, this is always where I end up in a disagreement, I feel like, with some of my colleagues on transportation and surrounding land use. I strongly believe, and there is a lot of literature backing this up from urban planning studies and real world examples and real case examples, that density needs, of some degree, needs to come first before an effective transit system is able to operate. Drive-throughs, by even the proponents of, the trade associations opposing this, were like, we're not dense enough. Yes, but drive-throughs really shoot that density and blow that density up. So I believe that if we outlaw some of the more egregious, sprawlier land use types, and especially with the fact that they have a negative impact on our city budget overall, we can invest that savings into better transit systems. And that's why I want to just try to start chopping away at these types of bad land use choices. Alderman Savage, I saw you had a hand up. Do you have anything else you wish to address, sir?
Yeah, just I totally agree with the sentiment, and I think like that's been on my mind as future phases, not necessarily specific to this, but in general as far as transportation, because I think as we make this transition, as we, for example, hopefully get some more of the bike infrastructure in, I do some, like other cities, I think Montreal have done like, they've partnered with local bike shops. They've gotten bikes for cheap, like from police departments elsewhere who are just get rid of them. And basically give a bike giveaway program to low income residents, right? Because they're the ones who are going to frankly benefit the most because cars are expensive, right? And so I think but I think it applies to other things as we improve our bus program, because frankly, I'd love to figure out a way to, our roads are subsidized, and that's for, frankly, the wealthiest. They're not paying, except indirectly through taxes, like for that use. So I'd love to find a way to almost pull some of that money and have for roads and going towards more of even going towards transit. And I guess we do that to a certain degree with the parking fund, but there's no way right now to get that money from roads themselves.
Yeah, that's it. That's a good point. When I was a legislative aide in the General Assembly last year, there was legislation that we were working on as it relates to transportation. And one of the things where there was contention in the hearing is who actually subsidizes the roads, et cetera. And I'm curious then your take on cars subsidize bikes and walking paths, et cetera, because, and particularly in the state, when you have a vehicle, you pay, whether it be through tolls, vehicle registrations, fees and fines to the MVA. All of that then turns around. Some of it goes to the general fund, but most of it is for the upkeep of our highways and roads, et cetera. And so the car is subsidizing and providing the funds so that we can go out and say, hey, let's do a bike lane or let's do a bus lane and paint it and all of this stuff.
That hadn't been able to pay for itself in 30 years, man, at least.
So I'm not saying that it's fully, paying for himself, but you don't believe that vehicles are subsidizing bikes?
State level, maybe you could argue that, but we don't get any of the gas tax. We don't get any tolls locally,
okay.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
Now, granted, you could say, well, we get some grant money from the state, but that's not the same as like a direct tax.
Okay, yeah.
Also, if they're not even able to pay for themselves, they sure as heck aren't subsidizing other methods of transportation.
Yeah.
And that's true. The true cost of driving is subsidized and hidden from most drivers, both nationally and statewide. That's all way above my pay grade, man. But, I'm just a little older guy. So, colleagues, do we have any further discussion on 0624 tonight? I think we made some good progress, had some good discussion on this. I would like to postpone further action if there is nothing else. And Mr. Lashinsky, if you wouldn't mind joining us at our next Economic Matters hearing, we meet on, Ms. Jackson, if you can confirm this, Wednesday, October 16th, is that correct? So we will be meeting Wednesday, October 16th, and since we actually have legislation, I'm very excited to meet and have you here. And thank you for joining us tonight. So do we need a motion to postpone as a point of order? We do? Okay, so in that case, can I please get a motion to postpone action on 0624 until our next meeting?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, everyone. So there is nothing else on the agenda unless there's anything else from my colleagues for the good of the order.
Nope.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I will second. All those in favor? Aye. Thanks for joining, everyone.